Welcome to the Property Pulse podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Haroon Sufi, the dynamic leader of Belluccio Property Group, a very well-established and respected project marketing company sourcing land in the Logan corridor. With a proven track record, over 1,000 lots sold in Southeast Queensland, Haroon has played a pivotal role in assisting developers with project sales and helping over 700 first-time buyers and 300 investors secure land and increase their net worth through this land purchase. Join us as we dive into Haroon's journey from launching one of the first 100-lot subdivisions of Parkridge to pioneering early land developments in Greenbank, and discover how his expertise is really shaping the region's property market. Let's jump right in.
Welcome to the Property Pulse podcast, your prime source for Southeast Queensland real estate insights. Understand the latest property data in Queensland to grow your net worth, as Geoff Tomkins interviews industry experts to give you the latest market updates.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Property Pulse podcast. I'm Geoff Tomkins, your host and founder of GCT Property, helping you navigate the real estate market in Southeast Queensland. Today, I'm very excited to bring along Haroon Sufi, the driving force behind Belluccio Property Group, a very well-regarded land project marketing company based in Logan. Welcome along, Haroon.
Thank you for having me, Geoff. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite.
You're welcome. So we met, I think it was around about 2 years ago. We were completed a high cash flow dual occupancy property for one of my clients, and you were the approved property manager. And I must say, Haroon, you are very efficient and you achieved a great result for our clients. On day one, from renting the property out, you achieved $150 a week more than we forecast.
Yes. That was a great property that you had developed for that particular client. And, when he approached me and he said, I'm looking to rent it out, I think we sort of mutually got in contact. And then, I think it was a double car garage property with another single car garage. So it was like a 3-car garage, but it had 2 units on it. When I looked at that, and I said the location where this particular client had built it was a high rental demand area. So there was a lot of demand for homes and people wanting to rent because it was close to all sorts of, it was basically in the city centre, wasn't it? So
correct.
I saw that, I think the rental demand was good and someone was happy to pay a little bit extra. So we got a good result for him mutually at the end of the day. And I think he's very happy with it.
Sure. Speak to him recently, very happy. So fantastic result. And it's the benefit of having professionals, working together very hard as a team and getting our clients. Our goal is obviously to achieve the best result for our clients. So just before we get underway with the questions, just a general disclaimer here. Just the advice we give today is general in nature. It does not take into account your specific needs or circumstances into consideration. So please just look at your own financial position before making any decisions. So again, welcome along, Haroon. Please, before we get started, just share us a little bit about your journey in the property investment space and where you've come from and sort of a little bit about your business itself.
Sure. Look, I got into the property industry fairly young. I was 18 when I bought my first block of land.
Wow.
I was very passionate about trying to purchase a house. And 18 when I was in Melbourne, Melbourne out of the suburbs, so about 45 k's out of Melbourne CBD. So if you know Melbourne well, there's a whole bunch of pocket suburbs which have had a lot of growth. So I looked at what I can afford. I went to a bank or a broker, I remember back then, and they said, this is how much you can spend. I started researching areas where, it wasn't really like there's a suburb called Dandenong, and Dandenong is about 35 k's out of Melbourne CBD. And obviously everyone wanted to live in Dandenong, but, the price was obviously very, very expensive, or at that time it was expensive. So I just researched areas that were a little bit further out from that location, but still within a 15, 20-minute proximity, you could still get to Dandenong. And it wasn't half the price, but it was relatively cheaper. So 18, I bought my first block of land. 19, I built a house. I rented that one out. started getting, a rental. I became a landlord at 19. I always say to people, that's probably something you don't know about me, Geoff, but 20, I went out to, I sort of picked Melbourne as a suburb, and I sort of went 30 Ks radius, and I purchased 45 Ks. And if I had one of those compasses or whatever, I'd sort of do a circle around the city. And I looked at other pockets in the north side, western side, where else can I buy? Because by that time, the first property was obviously rental producing property, and I didn't move into it. And when the second one, I picked another block called Craigieburn, which is again undeveloped. There wasn't even a shopping centre there, Joe.
Wow.
There was no shopping centre. There was but there was potential, because there was a train station, Stockland, which is another very big developer. They were doing a big master plan community. So they had some, when you go to the sales office, they'd have some, brochures and a little bit of a mud map of how the estate's going to look like and everything. So I saw another potential opportunity there, and at 21, I built my second house.
Wow.
My story with Queensland is fairly similar. I had a developer or a company that I was working for previously. They sort of, I approached them, they approached me, we sort of mutually got in contact, and they rolled out a map and they said, here's Queensland. I saw Gold Coast, I saw Brisbane, and in between Gold Coast and Brisbane, there was a bit of land called, or an area called Logan. And they basically rolled out the map and they said, hey, we've got some developers that have bought some land out in these growth corridor. And they just said, would you come to Queensland for a flight? Would like to show you the site. It's a 100-lot subdivision in a suburb called Park Ridge. It'll be fly in, fly out roll. Would fly you up to Queensland, fly you back to Melbourne. And I just heard flights, accommodation, car hire. I said, let's go, But what I see when I came here with them was there was a pocket of land, 30 km from Brisbane CBD, 35 minutes drive, only about 45 minutes to Southport in Gold Coast. Right. So, and it was undeveloped, it was all up broad acreage. There was probably, the only other developer that was there was Fraser's, which are a fairly large development company. And then there was this development company that had 100 lots. So that's my journey of how I started in Queensland.
Fantastic. And I think that's a good lesson for those looking at property investment. You bought ahead of the growth. A lot of investors can't see that potential, but you saw that potential and that growth. And if you can get in at the early stages as the land starts to get developed, and we're seeing that up in Queensland now, as we're running out of land, it's really affecting the supply and demands. For anyone not aware of Southeast Queensland, we sort of consider that from the Gold Coast up to Logan, Brisbane, out to Ipswich, and up to the Sunshine Coast. So a really good growth corridor now. So how have you seen the land supply change, Haroon, over the last 4 years in this Logan corridor?
Oh, it drastically changed. And that is what I'm saying, 6-7 years ago when I came to the suburb called Park Ridge, there was one petrol station in the middle of nowhere on Park Ridge Road, on the corner of Park Ridge Road in Chamberlain. There was a United petrol station. I don't even think, people even knew that there was a petrol station there, but there was one. And when I had this developer that had the 104-lot subdivision, I sort of saw that there was no shopping centre, there was no buses, there was no transport, the closest place would probably be Browns Plains. Or there was a shopping centre on Mount Lindsay Highway called Park Ridge Shopping Centre, but it had like Woolies and had one or two, specialty stores like a hairdresser or I think it was a pharmacist or a BWS. That was it. That was it in the area. But I've seen it change. Obviously, prices have gone up. Back then we were selling a block for 180,000. And now I think recently I've heard it's at about 400. It's about $1,000 a square meter now for a block of land. So you're looking at 400, anywhere from 380 to 400 grand if you can get one.
Yes, I'm actually on the search for a first home buyer right now that's entitled to the first home buyer grants, and we're sort of fairly open to most of the Logan corridor. and we just need a block of land that's going to work in terms of the price point to build a house on it. And the last 2 days, all my contacts and really struggling, and land that's registered next year is already pre-sold. So we're looking at the earliest release middle of next year. So, and anything that's registered, the prices really jump. So we're both seeing that in the market. And for that strong demand here, obviously we've got huge population growth coming into the Southeast Queensland corridor, and obviously the Logan corridor is affordable. You know, a huge hospital out there. We've got train lines out there. So that infrastructure that you talked about wasn't there a few years ago is really going in now, and it's really driving property. So in terms of this growth and demand and limited supply, how are you seeing that affecting land prices, sorry?
While it's having a huge impact on land pricing, like pricing is going up only because of supply and demand, right? Again, I'll go back to my Melbourne days. You know, we had in Melbourne in the early 2010, 2000, after the GFC, there was a huge mass migration of people from, you know, overseas, international students, whether it's India, China, wherever it was. There were a lot of students coming into Melbourne. So I remember you know, when I was doing my research in areas and suburbs and stuff, and I was looking at, there was about 1,000 people moving into Melbourne back in the early 2000s every week.
Wow.
And, you know, for an average household, you've got to have about 3 or 4 people per home, right? So if there's 1,000 people moving into a city per week, you need at least 200 homes. So 300 homes being finished or completed a week to sort of have those people move in, right?
Right.
So I'm sort of seeing the same thing happening in Brisbane. There's a lot of people in Sydney, Melbourne. You know, we've heard of interstate migration. I think the government's pulling a lot of people out of Melbourne, Sydney, because, you know, if you're a student or you're wanting to get your permanent residency in Australia, they're saying go regional, go to places like Brisbane, Logan, not just Brisbane, but they are pushing that Logan sort of area.
Yep.
And that's having a massive impact on land prices, because people that moved here 3-4 years ago that predominantly would have rented, and now looking, they would have saved some money and they're you know, earning a good income. They're now looking at that purchase, you know, and where else can you go, which is affordable, really.
That's right. I was just reading an article today, in fact, Haroon, about the how property prices are moving upwards, and the percentage of properties in suburbs in Queensland with a median price of over $1 million. And I think it was up in the over 40%. So that price point is really jumping, and clients we've helped into that Logan corridor, you know, building a brand new home and with land for, you know, around that sort of 500,000 mark now, everything's, you know, sort of 750, 800,000. So they've got great equity upside in a very short space of time based on that, you know, growth, immigration, infrastructure going in. So, so for leading into the next question, if we've got any people watching this podcast today and thinking, you know, should I be investing into Southeast Queensland or should I be waiting? What would your advice be from your experience? You've done it before, and you've seen the demand. You're on the ground now. You're sourcing land, developing land, selling land, and from you're talking to buyers and sellers every day of the week. What would your advice be for someone thinking about it?
My advice would be, if you can afford it, if you've got the green light from your broker or your finance, finance arm or your agent like yourself and myself, if we're sort of saying, look, you know, you're in a position to purchase, definitely purchase, because what I've seen over my year, especially working in this corridor, is people could have bought 3 years ago, but they, you know, oh yeah, no, we'll just wait, we'll think about it, or, you know, we'll just save another 6 months of savings or whatever the situation was. I was always telling them, you know, if you've got, let's say if someone had $30,000 deposit back then, but a house was $500,000, that was a decent deposit for a purchase, right? So if you're buying something for 500,000, you've got 30, 40,000 savings, let's say, you know, you're borrowing $460,000. But if you wait another 1 or 2 years, not only are you paying rent, you know, for the first time buyers I'm talking, if you're paying rent, you've got to rent for another 1 or 2 years, that's rent money. And then the price that you could have bought something for 500 is now 600. So you're sort of playing catch up all the time.
Chasing. Yeah.
The other thing I've also learned in my years, and I'm not that old, I'm only 35, but the other thing I've learned is whenever the government is pushing for something, like when the government says start putting solar, they start giving rebate for solar. So people who jump on that bandwagon and get solar, they're gonna capitalize on that, right?
That's right.
If the government says we're going to provide infrastructure into NBN connections, and people start converting, they're obviously benefiting from faster internet and all that sort of stuff. And the same thing is at the moment, the government obviously saying we need to build more housing, right?
Right.
We need to. They don't even have they're trying to work out a solution of how do we get more housing, because they know that there's going to be a problem. So if you're that one investor, on the fence about whether I should build or whether I should buy an established investment property, I just say, look at the government, look at the government, what the government's saying. They need to build more housing. So if you can just build one house or two houses, if you're lucky, right, you are going to benefit from that because they need more housing. You're helping build one house, and it's sort of like, it's a sort of cyclical effect, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, 100%. When you look at this, this demand that the government, immigration coming into Australia is huge. We're building less new homes than we were 3 years ago, yet our population is growing at unforeseen previous figures. And you're right, we've got a housing crisis. The government are telling us that, but really the government can't solve that housing crisis. It's up to us as investors to help solve that. The upside is we're increasing our value of our assets, our net worth, and obviously rents are continuing. So I think that's a really good point you raised, and especially for first-time buyers. I've seen it myself. For those that have gotten, and made a decision within the first 12 months in the current market, their properties are up $70,000 to $100,000. You simply can't save that in 12 months. And that means your mortgage is going to be, lower value, smaller than for the next 25 or 30 years when you pay it off than if you wait a year or two. So, and try and save up a bit more, you're really chasing, the market, Haroon. So I think, that points you made was really, really valid.
I think the other thing is, answering your question about, what advice would I have if someone's sitting on the fence? You just gotta, there's a lot of people right now that are also waiting for the market to cut, right? Or they're waiting for the prices to come back or whatever it is. I always say to those sort of guys, like, whether the market's going up, down, left or right, I think if you can purchase a property, over the last 10 years, I've seen property prices, increase irrespective of whether it's, a GFC or whether it's a pandemic that we had a couple of years ago. I personally bought when I was 18, and that was in 2007. So, that was at the start of the global financial crisis.
Correct.
7.8 or 8%, I think my loan was. Yeah, I agree. Property prices was a lot cheaper back then. I mean, I think my first house loan was $280,000 in a suburb. If anyone's watching, Cranbourne, 700 square meter block of land with 180 square meter 3-bedroom, or I think it was a 3 or 4-bedroom home that I had newly built. So had I not bought that year, then a year later, 2 years later, it had gone up 150, 200 grand.
Wow.
I just simply can't. I wouldn't have been. I only had I think 30,000 savings. So the banks looked at me and said, "Oh, well, you're buying a $280,000 house. How much savings have you got?" And I had 30,000. So technically, I had a 10% deposit,
right,
and 90% was what the bank had lent. But had I not bought with my $30,000 deposit, the value went to 500. And I'm not exaggerating the figures. These are actual figures. Like,
right,
if it went to 500. I'd need a $50,000-$60,000 deposit to add that 10%, but I'd be borrowing, instead of borrowing, 280 minus the 30 grand. I think I borrowed 250 as a loan. So I'd have to borrow like 450,000, which as an 18, 19-year-old working at Coles, I wasn't able to get that income,
Sure.
So I really, if your broker is telling you, yes, you can afford this, or if they give you a borrowing capacity, and you go to someone and start asking for some assistance to find land or house or whatever it is, just get it, because in 12 months' time, you'll look back and say, thank God I bought that.
I think that's great advice for anyone, and especially in the market where it's moving that fast, that prices that were 3 months ago are already out of date, prices have already increased. So, and like you said, I agree 100%. I've been in property a long, long time myself, now in New Zealand, now Australia, and never regretted buying property. Some years the property will go up, some years it'll go down, but the long-term average growth is, very strong. And the market we're seeing in Southeast Queensland, I've never seen a market in all my life that's moving that fast. So, and with this immigration and, these people buying property that are getting on the ladder, they're getting a great return in a very short space of time. So really appreciate your insights today, Haroon. I know we work together very closely. It's good to have industry professionals that you can discuss. It's always a great conversation we have together. The market and what it's doing. None of us can control the market, but we can control how we react and whether we take advantage of the market. You being a land specialist and speaking to these land developers in areas and seeing this growth yourself, and you're not just talking about it, you've actually done it. You bought property young, you knew that just had to buy and hold, and now you're expanding your property portfolio, which is a great story. And I think it can really be used to motivate other, especially first-time buyers that are really not sure about, getting in the market, and they're going to have to make some compromises. But like you said, you never regretted that decision, that equity growth allowed you to go on and build your property portfolio. So thank you, Haroon. I really appreciate the time. I know you're a very busy man, so really appreciate the time that you spent with us today.
My pleasure, Geoff. Thank you for having me, and look forward to having some more chat. Let's catch up for a coffee in the next couple of weeks, eh?
Sounds good, mate. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Geoff. Talk to you later.
Bye. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this podcast and got some content and knowledge out of this podcast, please share it with family, friends, for those that are thinking about property. We'd love you to leave us a review, as it really helps others to find our podcast, and share that content and get it further out to the general wider public. Remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up to date with the latest episodes. And if you'd like to make contact with Haroon or myself about what we talked about, please reach out to will be contact details on the show notes. And thank you for attending today, watching today, and love to see you on the next podcast.